I'm here, Josh.
Thanks, Michelle. Sandra Vanderzee.
Present.
Thank you, Sandra. Mark Clemens.
Here.
Thanks, Mark. Lisa Reeder.
Here.
Thanks, Lisa. Marcel Waldman.
Here.
Thanks, Marcel. Jen Celine.
Here.
Thanks, Jen. Drew Terry.
Yep, here.
Thanks, Drew. Jeff McGowan.
Here.
Thanks, Jeff. Tara Coyle.
Here.
Thanks, Tara. Courtney Eldridge.
Here.
Thanks, Courtney. Andrew Goose.
Here.
Thanks, Andrew. Kelly Butterworth.
Here.
Thanks, Kelly. Michael Tarlow.
Here.
Thanks, Michael. Jen Kessler.
Here.
Thanks, Jen. Kathy Keegan.
Here.
Thanks, Kathy. Michelle Picard.
Here.
Thank you, Michelle. Aaron McKee.
Here.
Tony Hunter.
Here.
Thanks, Tony. Trisha Marshall.
Here.
Thanks, Trisha. Krista Wood.
Here.
Thank you, Krista. Dana Rundle.
Here.
Thank you, Dana. Tia Kleinkopf.
Here.
Thank you, Tia. Christy Otley.
Here.
Thank you, Christy. Tim Baines.
Here.
Thank you, Tim. Stacy Joe.
Here.
Thank you, Stacy. Jennifer Ferris.
Here.
Thank you, Jennifer. Rosalind Osawagu.
Here.
Thank you, Rosalind. Amy Myrie.
Here.
Thank you, Amy. Pam Winskill.
Here.
Thank you, Pam. Jane Harris.
Here.
Thank you, Jane. Jill Ravenscraft. Jill Ravenscraft. Leanne Tupou.
Here.
Thank you, Leanne. Carrie Reckling.
Present.
Thank you, Carrie. And then I want to come back. There was two more I want to check on. Emily Hayes.
Here.
Thank you, Emily. And then Jill Ravenscraft. Jill, are you there?
Here.
Thank you, Jill. Perfect attendance, 40 out of 40. Apologize for that taking a little bit longer, but I just wanted to make sure that we went through that once and made sure that everybody was here. Welcome again. Attendance. I'm going to review the agenda. We will review minutes and hopefully get those approved from our last meeting. I'll give you a couple of minutes to look at those. There are a couple of tiny agenda items that we are going to go over before we jump into questions from the committee from the past 2 weeks and review the final portions of the elementary boundaries that are not yet completed. I wanted to talk after we get done with the minutes, just a little bit about the timeline. I think it's important for folks to know when this committee's work is done, what that looks like, where does it go, and what happens after that. So I think that I think some folks know that, but I think it's important for everybody to know what that process looks like. And then Jake wanted to one more time go over our charter and talk a little bit about that. We'll then jump into any questions from the committee from the past 2 weeks and the committee the correspondence from the community. There was obviously a lot the last 2 weeks, so we've got some time to talk about that. Jake is going to review final portions of elementary boundaries that we've still been talking about that have come up through community feedback and whatnot. And then we're going to go into breakout groups. We will be in breakout groups and you'll talk there. We'll report out from breakout groups, and then we'll have a group discussion and look at any motions that could be on the table. Then we will agenda plan for our last meeting, February 4th, and we'll also look to see if we need to schedule an additional meeting. I've got a couple of dates here that I can throw out if that's a place that we need to be. So without further ado, I'm going to try to do something which I'm not always spectacular at, but I'm going to give it a shot, which is to share my screen. So as I come here, we would like to take a look at the minutes from last meeting. I will go to the Boundary Review Committee. I will scroll down to our January 7th meeting and the unofficial meeting minutes. Let's see here. Jane Harris, since I see you directly, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see that on your screen that I'm sharing those minutes? Perfect. Thank you, Jane. So we will go down and let's just take about 2 minutes. You can either look at them on your own screen or you can look at them on my share screen, which I will scroll down to the very top with the welcome piece. And then I will try to do my best to not scroll too quickly. Let's take about 2 minutes to take a peek at these minutes to see if we can get these approved or if we need to make any changes. Okay. Any motions or any questions on the minutes, unofficial minutes from 2 weeks ago?
Don't be bashful. Take a motion on the minutes. Really?
Emily Hayes, a virtual hand in the air.
Yeah, I didn't see on the minutes. I'm the Sunny Hills rep. And last meeting I had asked about two areas, one street that was positioned for Pine Lake that the families had written about, asking if that could be zoned into elementary 16, as well as the Rainbow Lake neighborhood. That was brought up by group one, but it is not in the minutes. And there was no answer either.
I see some of that referenced. Oh, small communities continue to sales, which is very closer. Rainbow Lake. The Rainbow Lake Ranch and the Highland Creek question.
Yes.
And then I think it's also again recitated that answer is provided again in group 5's report out, Dr. Almy, if I recall. What did we say? Sorry.
It was also, thank you for being a good advocate, Emily. It was also in the overview of next meeting enclosure.
Correct.
Thank you for clarifying.
Okay. Okay, again, any motion on the minutes from the group? If you would like to make one, you can raise a virtual hand and I will call on you. Terrell Harkey, I see a virtual hand in the air.
I motion that we approve the minutes as they are.
Do we have a second of that motion?
I can second it.
All right,
Stacy
thank
Joe.
you. Thank you, Tony. Jake, I'm going to need your help now. Do we go to a discussion?
The motion has been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay. Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented. Are we having a poll, Stephen?
Yep, all those in favor would vote yes. So Stephen, whenever you can push that up there. And just remember, we can reconcile everybody here, but only just to make our job a little bit easier and the reconciling easier, please make sure only vote if you're one of the 40 voting members.
That's a direct message to the technical team. Colleen and Bridget, no, not to name names.
%. All right. Thank you very much. And what was the total number of votes on that, Stephen?
It is 40. The actual report of the voters is not available till the meeting concludes, but it can be downloaded afterwards and verified then.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. So now, before we jump into questions from the past 2 weeks and on community correspondence, I did want to talk a little bit about the process. And we talked about this a little bit the first meeting, but your group, this group, the 40 voting members are chartered, and Jake is going to go over this in just a second, to ultimately come with a recommendation that will go to the superintendent. The superintendent will then take that recommendation, and the superintendent can do two things with that recommendation. The superintendent can either accept that recommendation and present that to the school board in a school board meeting as what the final boundaries will be. The superintendent can also alter the recommendation that comes from this committee. The superintendent knows, I've worked with Superintendent Thiele for many, many years, the importance, though, of involving community stakeholders and building stakeholders in this process. to give him the very best recommendation that he could possibly get, which is why we are going through the process that we go through. Therefore, you will be making rather, I'm not a voting member, either is Jake, obviously, but you will be making a final recommendation when this process comes to fruition to the superintendent. The superintendent will take that recommendation. He will take a little bit of time to review that in great detail, and then he will make his final decision to the school board in a public forum, and will present that to the school board as what those final boundaries will be. So we went over that in the first meeting, but I just thought it was important to go over that one more time. I have full confidence in the 40 voting members as very capable individuals and very passionate individuals who represent their community, that you will make sound choices and ask very sound questions and get all of the information that you need to make the best decisions that you can make. So I just wanted to review that one more time. And I know before we jumped into the questions, Jake, did you want to review one more time the charter, just as we kind of jump into the questions and the breakout rooms?
Yep. So first thing, really jealous of Lisa Reeder right now. Just thought I'd throw that out there, being in the sunshine. So good on you, Lisa. My wife's Australian, so that's what she would say. Good on you for being in the sun. Secondarily, before we get into one clarity on Dr. Almey's point, the board of directors does not take action on the boundaries. I want to reiterate that. It's an administrative function. There is no board, there is no vote by the board of directors. It is a presentation of the boundaries to the board by the superintendent, and he will explain his rationale, and the technical team, or maybe potentially likely members of the committee. We often would, if traditional times, we'd invite you to the meeting and thank you for your service and give you some cake. But that's a little more difficult to do during COVID. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that the superintendent currently has the administrative authority to set the boundaries following the recommendation from this group. So there will be no further board action on the boundaries once he has made his decision. So just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you, Josh. And I'm going to share my screen as well. And was thinking about starting with the charter, which I will get to. But as this committee's moved along, Josh, share screen up. Okay, perfect. This is a reminder to all of us, including myself. We have been provided a huge amount of feedback. I think the Boundary Review Committee email box is at close to 700 and change last I looked for correspondence, which is great feedback. However, there is a time when we need to reground ourselves in your roles and responsibilities, particularly, and Dr. Almey and I talked about this, you're likely to make some difficult decisions tonight that are going to make some parties happy and some parties not so happy. But that is the role of this committee, is to reach some conclusion on boundaries. So again, I will not belabor or read to you your roles and responsibilities, but please take them into consideration as you process through these difficult and emotional issues, and know that you're serving a broader role for both your constituent group, but also the district that your children attend. So on that note, I will stop sharing the screen and then briefly go onto the website and take a look at the charter one last time. Is there any questions on the roles and responsibilities? I am not in any way trying to be preachy. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that as these decisions become more difficult, and I have had this conversation with many of you via email, that our digital format has lend itself to some rough behavior, and it does happen around boundaries. We talked about that, but I wanted to let you know that please reground yourself in those roles and responsibilities. And thanks to those committee members that brought that to my attention as a point of clarity for this evening. So again, briefly on the charter, I will share screen because I'm not doing that now. Superintendent's committee time frame is what we've talked about. And we talked about the parameters as well. And of course, a charter is often used to ground us in our work. but it also becomes a tool for communication or a rational basis for a proposal, right? You can see in a lot of the correspondence, people refer back to the charter to both accentuate either the position that the committee currently has or a position that they would like to move forward. So, and again, we talked about that numeric balance between student populations and then keeping neighborhood student populations together at schools. So important points of the charter. And of course, sent to you directly in advance of this meeting and posted online also is that long-term facility view, which when we provided the excerpt from the city of Issaquah, Central Issaquah plan, and then some preliminary enrollment growth projections for the valley based on permitted projects. I hope all of you had time to digest that. So, Dr. Almy, anything else on the charter itself?
I don't think so.
Okay. Let's stop share, and then we are going to, let me just get on the agenda itself. So I assume you've all, go ahead, Dr. Almy.
Oh, no. Do your thing, and then we do have a question in the chat, but let's get rolling on your thing, and then that'll be the first question.
Hold on. Before we begin, I had a question from was that the superintendent or you? Oh, superintendent messaging in. Josh, do you think you can handle
No, I
that?
got back to him. It's good.
Sorry, it was about the YouTube link, folks, and we want to just make sure people can see this meeting. We did not want a meeting where there's potential action. All of a sudden, the YouTube goes dark. That is not what we're wanting. So, any questions from the committee regarding the smidge of correspondence we've had since our last meeting? Generally, again, I did pull out. I try to pull out the themes, and of course they're ever evolving. And Lisa, we tried to get things out as soon as possible, Lisa Reeder, but they kept coming. And so we had to do a second tranche of email out to the group. There wasn't much choice there. So we walked that line of giving you enough information in advance, but also want you to have the most up-to-date public input. So we took your advice and tried earlier, but then we also decided to send a second batch. So anything that popped out of major concern or themes from the vast amount of community feedback that we received?
And I'll keep my eye on the hands in the air, Jake, but we do have a question in the chat. Can you let us know whether prior recent boundary committee recommendations were accepted as presented or amended by the superintendent?
The last two that I have been involved with the superintendent move them forward as presented by the committee. So
hand in the air, Kelly Butterworth. Kelly, question.
Okay, hi. So I had a question. Going through all the emails, you know, obviously there were so many of them. I feel like there were a lot of community members' assumptions on what the transportation, what was best in terms of transportation, what was best in terms of capacity, and like a lot of hypotheses, I guess, as it relates to Lakemont and the new, like Maple Hills Newcastle piece. And so I'm just wondering if there's something from like the technical team that sort of is able to like put a line in the sand as to where really the efficiencies are. Because I guess when I hear specifically from my Lakemont community members as a Sunset rep, you know, there's everyone's talking about how the 50 plus minutes it takes to get home on the bus from like PCMS in the afternoons, which is huge. And that goes back to the charter in terms of busing. And so what some people are talking about here, although we don't necessarily have the data to back this up, is there potential efficiency to be gained with that combination of Sunset and Cougar Ridge, where you could like fill more buses up in this one area and get to say IMS or MS6 or wherever faster. And then I also think that's a little bit of like what I've seen in some of the Newcastle proposal about it's shuttling less kids I'm not as well versed in that one, but it seems like it relates a lot to that. And so I'm just wondering if there's, and I did look at the capacity, which is scary based on the fact that there aren't like plans for even more schools to be built, particularly with the Issaquah Valley piece and Newcastle piece that feeds into Cougar Ridge. So I guess I'm just wondering if there's more that like analysis the technical team can provide to help sort of like give the committee members some understanding of like, are our hypotheses really, what makes sense, or is there, I guess to stop people from sort of coming up with what they think the best solution is and sort of having you guys figure out like truly what is that, and then everyone has that information, if that makes sense.
You bet. So briefly on the transportation utilization or efficiency, what gets difficult to answer is when a particular person says that if they live on, let's say, the outer edge of a portion of a current feeder pattern. So let's just take Newcastle, for example. Newcastle, if you live closer to Cougar Mountain, your commute to Middle School 6 via going over down Lakemont Boulevard and Newport, et cetera, and then going counter commute on SR 900, that is actually shorter in distance. Now, if you live, closer to Maywood or on the furthest parts of Newcastle's enrollment area, you may have a longer drive. And so transportation efficiency for us at the district level, when we look at it, transportation team, usually it's number of buses and length of route. So I did not see, I could not get to a place where I intellectually agreed with the proposal coming from the Newcastle community. And this is just me speaking about particularly on utilization or commute times, et cetera. And on capacity, I did touch on that in my email, and you probably saw my response to one of the Newcastle proposals about capacity is that capacity, yes, is measured on number of classrooms, but as we talked about in this group, it's also measured on the size of the core facility. So it is not just a numeric calculation strictly, albeit it depends on if it's a new construction or there's a remodel, right? So Maywood was a remodel. We didn't get a chance to expand the commons, and we have sufficient classroom space for 1,200, but the core facilities are extraordinarily taxed. And then the other assumptions that I had been seeing were some differences in enrollment. That Newcastle Maple Hills piece, for example, the team that was doing that work, the community, they had completely different enrollment figures than I did. I was looking at more of a 60 per average out of Maple Hills, which would be 180 students pulled out of Maywood versus the roughly 100 average coming out of the Newcastle feeder, dropping Maywood down to 900. And then transportation efficiency, of course, my team really got most of that work done when they helped create the springboard, to be completely honest with you. And then on the Sunset PCMS piece, right now Sunset is currently split fed, if I recall. Half is going to PCMS and half are going to IMS.
That was the original springboard, so now it's all going to IMS.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah.
So which makes it shorter, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I do think it's somewhat shorter. I mean, I'm not in the PCMS world yet, so I don't know that. I've just been hearing a lot about how long it is. I will say I've also heard from some Cougar Ridge folks that it also takes like 50 minutes from IMS as well. But that can stretch a lot further than, the area I'm talking about. So I don't know that, but I guess what I've heard about the length of the bus was like it coming up to say like Lakemont area off Village Park, and then having to kind of keep going, pick up, stop, pick up, stop, pick up. And if there was a way to sort of load up buses that are all in this area, because like, as we've talked about, like the Sunset area and Cougar Ridge, like I live much closer to Cougar Ridge than I do to Sunset, so we're near all those folks. So I thought like, oh, is there any way that those buses could be loaded up and then just go, straight to IMS to potentially be more efficient?
Is what we, Colleen, basically that, I mean, that is what we really do is, so an example you'll see if you live in the Highlands, there's basically 2 or 3 major bus stops in the Highlands. we used to pack those buses full of kids and have a singular drop. We try to direct shuttle as much as possible, if that makes sense. Colleen, do you want to talk about like how we historically route Cougar Mountain kids that come out of Issaquah High and IMS? I just don't want to speak out of turn.
Well, they would still be a full bus no matter what school they went to.
Right.
They'd be routed to be full. They wouldn't just be the same routes that they've had in the past.
But we usually don't begin dropping off until we get closer to their, if we have 60 Cougar Mountain kids, we're not dropping off on Newport across from IVE on our first stop.
No, we go up to Cougar Ridge area,
Right.
drop off there.
If that makes sense. So our efficiency is really gained by the routing, on the routing side more than anything. And of course, my team, Ms. Butterworth, is anxiously awaiting the final outcome of this to really determine how efficient the whole transportation network is going to be. Because there's still a lot of, hanging participles, I suppose, on our open-ended issues that we have to deal with that would really be able to sync that up.
Yep, thanks.
Okay, and we have 3 in the queue here for questions. We'll go Lisa Reeder first, then Terrell Hardkey, then Tricia Marshall. So Lisa, you are up.
Thank you. Hey, so mine are, well, one's a question and one's kind of a comment question. So, hey, Jake, on the charter, did the must take into consideration emotional and cultural effects of boundary changes get removed? Because I didn't hear you read that, and I'm actually not seeing it on the charter, but I know it was there at one point.
I
That's
have not tinkered with said charter, so I don't recall if that was there or not.
Or I wonder if we're reading it somewhere else, because that's one of the big sticking points for our last discovery issue is, we have had over 430 people sign a petition to keep the kids together at Pine Lake Middle School. And the biggest sticking point of that is the social emotional impact. So we had always thought that was in the charter.
It is not in the charter.
Okay. We'll have to research where we saw that before.
Not that it hasn't been an important community message, but it was not in our charter. And of course, we have plowed some of this ground when we talked about how we weren't using boundaries to create similar income level or poverty rate schools, or we are not boundarying for race or ethnicity.
Yep.
In this case, so that is not a change to the charter. Ms. Reader, that has never been in the charter. Okay.
I'm gonna try to see when we go into breakout groups later if I can find where I was reading that just for fun. The only other thing is, how do you feel about not having high school boundary discussions happening at the same time as this? The reason I ask is because we were toying with an idea that we thought would solve the Discovery Pine Lake Middle School, Beaver Lake Middle School conundrum, but it relied on high school boundaries ultimately. So what it was is there's a percentage of kids at Sunny Hills that feed to Pine Lake Middle School, but will ultimately go to Issaquah High School. So if their boundary held and they ultimately went to Issaquah High School, it would make more sense for them to go to PCMS than it would for them to go to PLMS, because all the kids at PCMS are going to go to Issaquah High School, right? But we don't want to shove our problem onto another group of parents and kids if in fact maybe they'll end up routing out to Skyline or the new high school or something like that. So I don't know if that makes sense what I'm asking, but knowing high school boundaries might help make further out decisions as we look farther into the future, which might have made us willing to suggest, talking to those families at Sunny Hills that are right now going to go to Pine Lake Middle School that possibly could have gone to PCMS, which would leave room at Pine Lake Middle School for the Discovery kids to stay there. Thank you, Carrie Miller, if you're listening, for that great idea.
We, again, purposely kept high schools out of this conversation. And the good news is that when we redraw high school boundaries, we can take into consideration the newly adopted middle and elementary boundaries. So
Okay.
we have an opportunity to remedy that. We just don't have a remedy right now for that discussion. So it is a bit of a chicken and egg when it comes to feeder patterns. Like we were talking today, well, most of our conversation lately has really been about middle school feeders, not elementary boundaries. For the most part, we haven't had a change to physical elementary boundaries for the last, we had some technical changes and then we reversed course on that discovery. But for the most part, we've kept elementary catchment areas pretty solid. What really we're deciding tonight is the elementary, how those elementaries are going to, where they're going to feed into middle school level. So yes, it quite honestly, that process doing remote and having, another 5 principals and 5 community members. And then of course, high school is having their own unique issue. We decided that we would break that apart and because it is a Herculean effort for high school boundaries and only happens roughly once a generation. We haven't opened a high school since '97 when Skyline opened. So we've done these boundaries at elementary and middle school, obviously way more often. So we will take that into consideration when we do the high school boundaries because we have an opportunity then to move them around slightly to account for those anomalies.
Okay.
Okay, next in the queue, Terrell Hardkey. Terrell, you're up.
Thank you. I have a question and then just a concern I wanted to share. I was hoping to get clarity around which neighborhoods over the last 10 years or so have been the fast growing neighborhoods that have contributed to the overcrowding at Maywood.
Well, I don't know if you could, I don't think it's a singular neighborhood. If you've been in the South End for a while, there have been in the last 10 years, and Principal McKee or former Principal Morris, you can speak up as well. There's basically been development all around or just to the edge of the urban growth boundary in the South End. So any available land that could be developed either has been or is going to be developed. So it's not a singular, like a map. I could point to the Highlands, obviously, and say, that's driving a significant growth in the corridor. It's not that easy in the South End. We just had several small to medium-sized housing developments, no massive master plan community to speak of. Now, of course, the one exception would be the 900 units of housing in the Newcastle Commons, right? It's still not the size of the 3,500 units in the Highlands, but at the same time, 900 units is nothing to laugh at. And it's a mix of multi and single family, so it is slightly different. But it's just been continual development and redevelopment of South End properties for the most part, similar to how the Sammamish growth has materialized.
Jake, there's also the piece that the other 2 high schools have 2 full middle schools that are feeding into them. Liberty only has 1 middle school feeding into it. That 1 middle school is Maywood. Therefore, that's a very, very large school. So when you look at middle school 6 coming on to alleviate the overcrowding at Maywood, that's where that comes into the equation. But just remember, both Skyline High School and Issaquah High School have 2,000 student, not quite at Pine Lake and Beaver Lake, but 8s and 9s and thousands at PC and IMS feeding into their high schools. There's only 1 middle school that feeds currently into Liberty. And then that middle school has over 1,200 students in it.
And for community clarity, our choice high school, Gibson Neck, has no boundaries. It is so if you were like, what Gibson Neck? Well, Gibson Neck is open to anybody that wants to apply and go through the process. So it doesn't have a boundary. And so that's why, just for clarity's sake, if people are like, well, where's Gibson Neck fall in this? Remember, that is open to anyone that applies that is of right age and qualifications.
Okay. I haven't shared my concern quite yet, but since in the charter, it says we're supposed to share what we know about our school, right, and our area. And I'm the Apollo rep, and I've lived in the Newcastle area for 39 years. And I can tell you, having grown up in Newcastle and Newport Hills, the amount of growth in Newcastle all the way down through Apollo and now starting to head out towards Briarwood is much more significant than if you're continuing to drive down 128th and you get deep into Briarwood and into Maple Hills, you're just not seeing as much. The concern that I brought last time that didn't really get voiced, because I want to make sure I said it. Equity should be central to any conversation about education. And I'm seeing this trend that higher income areas are kind of banding together and wanting to make plans to get ideal feeder patterns for their communities at the expense of lower income communities. And I completely understand Issaquah is not Renton, it's not Kent, it's not Federal Way, but I also think that some of our elementary schools sitting at 20% free and reduced lunch, which is probably an underestimate considering people aren't filling out the paperwork right now. I think it's really unfair to say, well, Lakemont wants to stay together, so let's split Clark, or Newcastle wants better feeder patterns, so let's move Maple Hills. So I think we need to be aware that some of those families rely on public transportation. They live in apartments. They need a predictable feeder pattern so that they can get their kids to school.
We appreciate that, Tyrell. And I think even though the amount of communication we received from our community is daunting, it was good to see the different points of view from each of the locations or the constituent groups that are up for discussion tonight. I would have been very concerned had I not heard from Maple Hills community or Clark or IVE, and or only heard from Sunset as an example. So the good news is your message. I think it was well said, and you said it as politically correctly as you possibly could, and I appreciate that as your facilitator. For the most part, it's been good to see that there was a lot of work and correspondence done by all parties involved. But what concerns me from my district perch would be if there was a silent community that wasn't aware of what was going on. And so I think from the correspondence, you can see that lots of people know what's going on, which is good. We don't want to do this under the cover of darkness and surprise anybody. So that is those are the meaty questions we will be working on this evening, but I do appreciate your candor. That's not always easy to speak that way, particularly in front of 55 people you don't know that well, and the fact that it's on YouTube. So thank you for your courage and speaking your truth. Appreciate it.
Two left in the queue, Trisha Marshall, and then Todd Wood. Trisha, you're up.
Thank you, guys. This is a little bit building off Terrell's questions. And so maybe for the sake of myself and maybe the whole committee and maybe lots of people watching on YouTube, are you able to give any context to when the springboard was proposed? Were there specific targets we are looking to hit in terms of capacity utilization at IMS and Maywood?
Again, the simple math for folks, we have 5,000 middle school kids. So right now, that's 1,000 apiece, right? We have 4,996, the last enrollment count I had. So we're running an average 1,000. Adding a 6th middle school, you'd like to bring those middle schools down between 850 and 900. It makes the most mathematical sense. I don't want to. This is one of the few times that a community has a direct voice on how their school boundaries and where they attend. It doesn't happen very often, boundary committees, right? So I always understand the passion around it. But ultimately, it is about facilities and operations. And this is the chance we have as a system to equalize our buildings as much as possible. And of course, when we did the springboard, we tried to even that out. You can see that from the Pine Lake, Beaver Lake split that was proposed. Again, we also wanted to allow capacity to Issaquah Middle School, knowing the growth. So it's when people ask me about what was the goal for capacity, well, it's twofold. One of it is numeric balance the best you can, and then secondarily hoping to allow for growth in those areas where it's coming, so that we don't have to do this again. for a while. So last boundary, when I was looking back at the numbers, the committee approved a boundary for Grand Ridge that had it starting at 415 kids. And they're like, oh, Mr. Cooper, that's really low. That's crazy. Are you sure? I said, yes, please trust me. It's going to grow and then it will stop growing. And by the way, it did that. But the point is that the committee had to have some trust that the growth was going to come, and that we were going to start those buildings a bit lighter to accommodate. So I want you to know that it was about enrollment growth, and particularly in the south end, we wanted to, if the boundaries are working and the schools are balanced for what their sizes, and we could move around some program if needed to make kind of the south end come along and only touch one school. You saw that we didn't go into and reboundary Apollo, Briarwood, and Maple Hills. We left well enough alone, right? And we been very transparent about Newcastle, about where its location is, and quite frankly, the number of students it has at each grade level, which puts Maywood right down at that 900 number. So that was our logic as we built the springboard. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
Yeah, it answers that piece. And just kind of a follow-up that's piggybacking Charles is, we know that the significant growth in the district is coming from the valley floor. Do we have any sense of the growth that would be coming in the south end, even if it's just, I know enrollment growth is difficult to predict given COVID, but even just looking at the historical enrollment growth for Newcastle versus Apollo, Briarwood, Maple Hills as an indicator?
let's see, I have to go back to our first set of materials when I wanted to give you the historical enrollment and facility data. That, that crazy set of graphs that had all the buildings with their historical enrollment patterns. I will just look at this. I'll look at by corridor in particular, or by region to see.
Hey, Jake, while you're looking, could I share something about when I opened Briarwood? Would you mind?
Yes, please, Mr. Terry.
So when we opened the new Briarwood, which had 28 classrooms, our first year we had 22, and people thought we were crazy. And within 2 years, not only did we fill the building, now we have 11 portables. So Jake told us that growth was going to happen, and boy, did it happen. So I'm very leery about projected numbers of people coming into buildings, and I understand the reason to try to keep things lower because it happens, and I lived through it, and I'll tell you, having 6 open classrooms and doing schedules and whatnot and facilities compared to 28 plus 11 is a different story.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. So let me share my screen really quickly.
As you're sharing that, Jake, we do have 2 in the queue. The next up is Todd Wood. Do you want to show this first and then we can jump over to Todd?
Yeah, I mean, I share the screen. That is a really busy graph. I'm sorry, we got a lot of schools in the system. But one of importance, though, let's see. So this is by region. And just so you know, for us, the regions are basically the main high school feeders. So central is Issaquah High, current feeder, north area is Skyline, and the south area would be Liberty, and then the all schools. So you can see over time, and of course, don't worry about the COVID decline, but over time, the central area, which was driven predominantly by huge amount of growth in Issaquah proper and the Highlands and redevelopment in the Valley, because they're still land-based. Remember, a lot of growth is going to be driven by available land, or unless there's a policy change in available land or the growth management area. And you can see the north area, which was Skyline, right along clipping with it, but slightly below it. And that, of course, has to do with land base. You've seen a lot of, there is development in up on the plateau. But not much developable land of large size left, but a lot of redevelopment and infill will still occur. And then the south, of course, just given that it is a smaller portion of the population, you can see it kind of grew along with everybody else, but just at a slower rate. Now, I will say in the long term, the South has the most growth potential because it has the biggest land base, but it would take policy level changes at the county to move the growth line for there to be a significant impact. So for the most part, I think that it's going to be development and redevelopment, with the biggest areas of growth coming in that central Issaquah plan, which I gave you excerpt to, and kind of always blows my mind when I look back at it to see how many units they have planned over the next decade. So Todd, do you have anything to say? Sorry, I'll stop the share.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted, first of all, as has already been said, it's really a challenge to be able to represent your community, every member of that community, the entire district, all simultaneously. But I don't know, you probably noticed a few emails coming through from Newcastle community this last couple of weeks. And I've had people, obviously on both perspectives, as far as, wanting to, seeing the value of going to the new school and seeing how that works, and also wanting to be able to stay at Maywood. And one of the things that I just want to make sure that people are aware of is that the large number of the emails that came based on that one proposal, is that the proposal, the people that worked on that really did their best to try to look at the actual data and to focus on that, rather than, just trying to propose exactly what they wanted. But their attempt was to look at the data. And they actually, yesterday late, reached out to me and had a Q&A type document that they sent that wasn't able to get in on the email. So I just wanted to bring that up. I could kind of hit some of their points in response to questions that people might have, Jake, or I could drop that into the chat, or whatever you think would be appropriate.
Dr. Wood, I think it'd be great if you could put that into the chat.
Okay.
If you don't mind, that will be there for people to look over the meeting, because our 2 hours goes so quickly.
Got it.
That would be greatly appreciated. And of course, I know that there's going to be a robust set of conversations in the breakout rooms this evening. So, Josh, how are we for time? We probably need to take a few more questions, and then.
Yeah, we got one more hand up. So let's let Amy Myrie, your hand has been up for a while. I want to make sure we don't miss you.
Yeah, I just had a quick question on Trisha's, kind of building on Trisha's question. I totally understand the reasoning of splitting the middle schools equally so it balances, but my question, and it goes kind of back to the discovery piece we've talked about, because a lot of people in the discovery emails, I felt like, were asking this question. I understand it makes sense to split middle schools equally, but are their capacities for the buildings all equal? And if they're not, then does it make sense to split the students equally? Because a lot of the discovery folks are saying, well, Pine Lake was just rebuilt and it has a larger capacity, so maybe we don't need to move those kids over to Beaver Lake. And I had no idea if that's true or not, but that seemed like a valid thing to ask, a valid question.
Hold on, let me pull those pieces up. So yes, they are not built the same. So there was that is a valid point, and I talked to a community member on Monday about the fact that they are built of different sizes. Now, one thing that is interesting though is that Beaver Lake has those portables already in place. So let me go to my share screen real quick. So yeah, it's a valid numerical argument. There's no doubt. All schools are not created equal when it comes to size. But I'll point you here is one difference is that the permanent capacity at Pine Lake and Beaver Lake, you can see there's 140 there or so difference in the core. But Beaver Lake has a boatload of existing portable capacity. Now, Pine Lake has future portable capacity, but a portable to move into site, even though when it's stubbed in and pad ready, it's still going to be between 250 and 300,000 to put a portable on for a double classroom. Now, it's cheaper than the cost of a square foot on the square foot compared to like a brand new stick built building. But at the same time, they do have a valid point. However, we haven't deployed those portables yet to Pine Lake to make them, 100% equal. So Beaver Lake actually has a higher total capacity than Pine Lake's core capacity, 965 versus 1,000. Why would I set up the spreadsheet up this way so I can't see to add the numbers quickly? Sorry. That 930 plus 52, that'd be 982 versus 790 and 260. That is a 10 key you hear. That is correct. That's 1,050. So very close in total capacity. But Beaver Lake is already set up for that. And I do believe there's still potential growth around Pine Lake in its attendance areas, which we really didn't talk about, but there is still a lot of infill and redevelopment in Pine Lake's proposed boundaries. So if that helps, Amy.
Hey, Jake.
Yes.
This is Jason. One more thing to add to that that we have to look at when we talk about capacity of buildings. And I realize this was more directed at the Pine Lake Beaver Lake question, but I think it is fair to throw in like a Maywood Middle School, for example, that has pushed up to close to 1,200 students. The strain on that building is not necessarily classroom space, although 1,200 fills the classroom up, but the real strain that is experienced is common area space. So that's another thing that doesn't really show up in the spreadsheet, but I can tell you things like hallways, restroom facilities, libraries, and cafeterias, which would be like common area spaces. Those are working above max capacity when a building like that is of that size. So there are some other things like that. Again, may not apply to Beaver and Pine, but it does apply to the Maywood question of how that school is that big. It's really a stretch. They have the classrooms, but the common spaces aren't quite there for that. So another nuance that the math may not show.
That's the art of the boundary, not the science. Okay. Any other questions, Dr. Almy?
There is one. Well, there are two, but I'm going to read those, and I think that they are ones that maybe Jake, you and I can work on addressing when we come back from breakouts. I want to read those though. I want to read the questions, and then we can make sure that we address those when we come back from breakouts. Maybe, but I want to make sure that people do have enough time in breakout rooms tonight. The first one was from Principal McKee. Is the growth potential different in the parts of the South End that are unincorporated King County and parts of the city of Renton and city of Issaquah that our South End schools serve?
Well, Aaron, that was an easy question. I'm just kidding. It depends. Again, it all depends on land use. So there's certain areas of unincorporated King County that are outside and inside the urban growth boundary. So the weird thing about the South End, Doofers, as a point of reference, or the ice rink, that's actually technically in the rural area and outside the urban growth boundary, which is really confusing. Those were under the little less restrictive Ron Sims days in the county where things got permitted and you're like, what, why is that out there? That doesn't happen as much anymore, if at all. And so it really depends upon the land use and unincorporated. You have huge swaths of land that, for example, the 80 acres that the district sold in the Winterbrook Farm along May Valley Road, where we were no longer able to site schools. So it really, the unincorporated areas drive some growth, but not a significant amount because really it's just not allowed under the GMA or the county, the region-wide, what is it, Vision 2040 or 2050 they're on now, the county-wide planning policies. So less growth out of the unincorporated area, definitely more growth. And remember, cities are required in the Growth Management Act to grow a certain amount. So they have targets set by the state. And so their development, redevelopment, and density of their development is required under state statute, and they're required to have a growth target. So I know I'm getting a little policy wonk on you, but I remember all the cities that you live in, if you live in an incorporated area, they're required to take a portion of the growth coming to the state. So that's why you see these cities have these large and long-term development plans, because they need to show that they're going to accommodate for growth and continue dense development and keep urban sprawl at bay, for lack of a better description. So
Okay, and I just want to make sure that we cover the chat. As the Maple Hills rep, I have my portion to share in response to the Newcastle proposal. I believe the agenda for tonight is to have us discuss the 3 items in our breakout groups prior to returning to the whole group and sharing out. So I don't mind waiting until later when it's most appropriate to express my community's views. Sorry, Andrew, I think that's a great idea. Let's work through those in breakout groups, and then we will share those out and to the larger group discussion later. Yeah, Jake, would you like to frame our group discussions that we need to get to here and go into breakout rooms? I know that there are we've done a lot of work with some of the lower hanging fruit, but there's some really important conversations that we have in breakout rooms that we need to have tonight. And I definitely want to give enough time in breakout rooms to have those discussions. So do you want to frame that conversation?
You bet. So the group's kind of accustomed to my Tuesday boil up of the salient larger issues that the committee has to tackle or to look at. And some of it hasn't changed, right? We're still, we are not to low hanging fruit. I don't know if nobody calls it high hanging fruit, out of reach fruit, whatever the fruit may be. But I want to remind you of something. So the only way the springboard proposal is changed is by an action of the committee. So if the group does not take action on, let's say, the number 2 or number 3, then that proposal dies, right? It's a bill that doesn't become a law because the committee did not alter the springboard. You've amended the springboard probably 4 or 5 times already. So in that case, if you're going to make any changes, either 1, 2, or 3, there would have to be a motion coming out of the committee to make those changes if you wanted to do that. The other alternative, of course, would be to make a motion to adopt the amended springboard. That would be one option. That, of course, does the same thing. That would provide committee voice to 2 and 3. Again, remember, because A, B, and C are currently they are the adopted proposal, right? So those splits in number 1, those are currently in the adopted springboard or the amended date springboard. I'll have to clarify my language. So the committee is going to have to take action to make any changes, or if there was desire to move 2 and 3 forward, they would have to take an action or vote it down, right? Those would be your options. So either adopt the springboard as amended, or would have to vote down each of those in a separate manner. So that would be my advice to you: is chew on 2 and 3 the best you can. The majority of number 1, of course, there's that's still the issue in 1C on the discovery split, which I would say is middle hanging fruit compared to those other 2 large ones to tackle. So Josh, am I missing anything there?
No, I think that's pretty good. And I think that it's really important that we let folks discuss these in the breakout rooms and come back from that. And I want to make sure that we give them 30, 35 minutes to do that in those breakout groups. We do have one question that from the group that we'll have first in the queue when we come back on traffic patterns. So with that, DJ Stephen Collins, can you push us into groups and bring us back at about 7:38?
7:38, Dr. Olney.
That's 35 minutes.
Can I? Okay. Everybody's still
Good
moving
time to
around.
remind you guys that you're still live, so I'm going to throw you into a breakout room as well. Just so that
Greatly appreciated.
Yes. So hang tight. I'll get you in there.
And technical team, once we get into the breakout room, I will share the question from the committee member so we can be prepared to answer that to the best of our ability when we come back. So as soon as we get into that room, we will, I'll share that with folks.
And just kidding, because they're open, I can't make a new one. So I'm just gonna pull the stream. It does mean that the feed will change. So I will give you an updated link when that's done. The stream is coming back up. It'll take about another 5 to 10 seconds, and then I can start recording as soon as it comes up. So as soon as it says unpaused or recording, the stream is back on as well.
All right, folks, we'll kick into gear here. As soon as I see that recording pause button go off, I want to make sure that we are recording to our YouTube channel as we say that we will. So let's just give it a few more seconds here. Stevens, there it is.
There we go.
Looks like we're back. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, everybody, on our YouTube channel and all our affiliate YouTube channel stations. I don't even know what that means.
I don't think we have affiliates, Josh. We're not that good, my friend.
Folks, before we get going here, it is 7:40. I want to do a quick barometer test here. This is not an official motion or anything. I would like to suggest that we have a hard stop tonight at 8:30 instead of 8. That gives us a little bit extra time. So we only have about 19 minutes left until 8. So if you can live with that, vote yes. If you are not in favor of that, vote no. I just kind of want an idea on that because we are low on time here, but we wanted to give enough time in the breakout room. Stephen, can you push that out there just to see? This is not an official motion or anything. This just allows the facilitators an idea of how people are feeling about extra time.
So the question is, do they want to have an extra half an hour in case we need it? It 80-20 split.
80-20 split. Okay.
For yes.
Okay, let's see where we are in 20 minutes.
We'll be mindful. Maybe we'll go 15 minutes instead.
Okay, so let's start. Group 1. Let's go from the bottom. Carrie Reckling, please summarize your group's conversations.
I'm used to going last, but we are in favor of adopting the springboard as amended. We felt better about through the communications that came through that we heard more of the voices of all the impacted communities and all of the discussions. We had a really good conversation about our district as a whole, and you can tell that each school has community that is passionate in that community and want to do its best for their community, which is great. But we also talked about people move to Issaquah for Issaquah school district schools, and we want to take to heart our role that we are preserving what we feel like is best for the school district as a whole. So we were all supportive of moving forward as proposed.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Tim Baines.
We shared very many sentiments. It's the same sentiments with Group 5 there. We were also in favor of moving forward with the springboard as it's been previously amended. I think we're very appreciative for just all of the community input and impressed by that. And had some good discussion around each of the points, in particular points 2 and 3. But similarly, I think moving forward with the plans as they've been as the spring has been proposed up to this point in time. The other piece that I just wanted to hope we could follow up on was just some feedback on the technical corrections that were suggested at the last meeting regarding those 2 neighborhoods that were mentioned at the beginning of our meeting tonight. So just feedback for those 2 communities on what that might look like.
Thank you, Tim. Aaron McKee, your report out, Group 3.
Yes, thank you. So I think largely we are in support of the springboard as it stands. We did have some healthy debate about especially number 2 with the Lakemont proposal. And we did have some concerns about number 3 regarding the impact on the Maple Hills community.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Anything else to add to that, or is that kind of the summary?
I could go on, but I know we're short on time.
Oh, that's okay. That's why I didn't want to cut you off. Group 2, Lisa Reeder. Lisa, take it away.
Hey there. So for the Lakemont Clark proposal, we support the original current springboard as it was. The new proposal feels a little too special interest to us. It highly benefits one community. The IBE kids are going to have to drive there, and the impacts on traffic, which is already terrible in non-COVID times down around that area, are going to be really unimaginable. And the impacts are going to happen to communities that just don't need to happen. And we have a lot of representatives from those communities in our group that spoke to that specifically after talking to their people. Our group could not come to consensus on the Discovery split. We see both sides and where people are coming from, but we could not agree to a solution or to acceptance in total of the Discovery split.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And Joe Ellen, Group 1.
Thanks. Sorry, I have a little bit more because our group has the principals from those proposals. So we have a little bit more. First, Michelle, as the principal of one of the middle schools, just wanted to express her agreement with the 80-20 split for PLMS and BLMS, and just says that, you know, prioritizing the balance of the middle schools, as we had talked about in the beginning of our discussion, really needs to help guide our decision, and agrees with that 80-20 split, even though that might be something hard. You know, that's guiding our decision. And not every middle school we have in our Issaquah school district is an excellent. We did have one question brought up by Megan about those pieces that were originally in the original springboard, moving from, they're originally going to be from Discovery to Endeavor, and looking like they were balancing the numbers. I think we voted to amend it to move them off. And there, I guess she was getting some questions about now it was looking not as balanced in the spreadsheet. So there's, Jake, a question if you can look at those pieces that were originally there and now are not, because they did not. Now it's a question if the schools were now balanced.
Yeah, quickly, early on, given the testimony and communication from the Discovery neighborhoods, you all made the change to the springboard and pushed those kids back from Endeavor to Discovery. So yes, it is. There is not perfect numerical balance there. But there is some political harmony, and then we will likely fill Endeavor with some additional program, if that makes sense. So because it is right there on the plateau, and it is able to be filled by program. So again, as we talked about, we did make I won't call it a concession. We listened to the community about their desire to keep their K-5 kids together, and not, change Discovery's boundaries if we didn't need to. So that was a bit of a numerical concession. And so I guess that's democracy at work, right? So yeah, you're correct. The numbers are correct. There is an imbalance there, but at the same time, remember, we'll have program going into Endeavor as well. So those numbers will be higher when program is added.
Great. And then just as I wanted to speak as the Maple Hills principal, obviously I spoke to many of my Maple Hills community and going through all of, as you all saw, the Maple Hills comments and communications. And we all talked tonight, and I wanted to give the Maple Hills community an opportunity to share their communication with the Boundary Review Committee. And just like we talked about at the beginning, it's obviously a very emotional proposal, and emotional anytime you're talking about a boundary review change. It's an emotional thing, and I think especially, as many of you know, in the South End, we consider ourselves a family between all 4 of the schools. So it's hard when anybody wants to make or needs to make a change. So that's always hard. But I think in all of the communications you can see, it really just comes down to, as many of you saw, just the numbers. And Maple Hills is the smallest school in the district. You know, the bottom line is we need to help Maywood just be a better learning environment and reduce those numbers. And Maple Hills just doesn't have the numbers, right? So taking the smallest school out of Maywood doesn't help. It doesn't reduce the numbers for Maywood. And also Maple Hills is limited zoning. We have no growth. So when you're looking at Briarwood, Apollo, and Newcastle, they've continued to burst at the seams over the past 5 years and more before I even got there. Their enrollment and their construction has continued to grow, and Maple Hills has not at all. So it might reduce the help. It might help Maywood maybe a year, but in the future it won't help Maywood at all. So that was, you know, numerically, it's just unfortunately not going to support Maywood's enrollment capacity. And then the other, just numerically, it's Issaquah Hobart. So even I thought maybe, you know, families that live mileage-wise closer to Issaquah Middle School maybe would look into that. But even those families that live closer just were against this move to IMS just because of the Issaquah Hobart traffic. So that was just in my communication with families from our Maple Hills community. Todd did share. Todd wanted to share from his Newcastle group. You know, he met with his group, saw a great proposal from another community, thought it was very well thought out. They wanted to do their own data analysis. So they met together. They wanted to look at it from a numeric perspective. You heard today they sent a Q&A yesterday. And he really just wants to make sure to recognize their efforts. He also has people who feel the opposite, who do want to go to middle school 6 or maybe live closer, but really wants to recognize that a lot of work went into that proposal and wants to be sure that they're heard and they're recognized by the committee today. And, you know, also wants to make sure that we always keep equity of all the schools in mind. And then some other people on our committee, again, just recognize that Maywood, our parent rep from Maywood, recognize that moving Maple Hills just does not support helping Maywood enrollment. And it also increases the free and reduced rates for IMS. Putting the 3 schools that were in that proposal together at IMS raises the free and reduced rates higher than the other middle schools. And it just doesn't doesn't reduce the enrollment.
Thank you. Is that it, Joe?
That's it. Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Jake, as we see, I look at the participant section and to see if we have any other questions or comments and whatnot. I know we've talked throughout the breakout groups and whatnot. Anything to add, subtract, not subtract, but add to the conversation as we've talked about some of the points. I mean, a lot of these boundaries, you work very hard with our transportation department, with our facilities department. A lot of these boundaries, a lot of these questions are really centered around the departments that you oversee. Any thoughts from those 5 report outs there?
So on the Rainbow Ranch, the Sunny Hills Elementary School 16, I would like to probably table that, as I think it's more of a technical correction than anything. We did look at it, and it doesn't seem to cause a major issue one way or the other. But I would need to get clean maps and motion language from my departments. So just know that I imagine we are going to have another meeting. And it is going to be, I'd imagine, potentially technical corrections, depending on what the action takes. Because if you choose to take action tonight, we want to make sure all the maps are perfect and the boundaries are awesome and there's no fudging on the lines. So just to that point, I'd like to make that a technical correction for next meeting if possible. And then I was pulled into a breakout group, and I did want to just thank you all in advance, and thank you for handling all this with grace and wherewithal, because I've never seen this amount of communications, and we've never done a boundary review in COVID. So you all have, if somebody asked me, did you represent your community? I would say, hell yes, you did. And you know, you're not in easy spots because you're about ready to cast a vote. But at the same time, if anybody asked me, did you represent your community? I would without a doubt say, yes, you accurately represented your stakeholder group. And I thank you all for that because it's not easy. So there's a few hands in the air. So.
Yep. Courtney Eldridge was first, so she's first in the queue. Courtney, take it away.
I move that this committee recommend the amended MS6 Springboard proposal.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion that has been seconded. I'm going to rely on Jake Cooper and board member Suzanne Weaver. I believe we go to a discussion next. Is that correct, Jake and Suzanne?
No, I just want to, Courtney, if I could clarify.
Yes.
You are wanting to, that in effect would vote the springboard basically as it is amended to date, correct?
Correct.
Can you put that up for us to see, Jake, so that we know?
Well, I was there is a motion on the floor, but I'm just actually seeking some clarity so I can make sure that I'm articulating it the same way. So to clearly articulate it back to you, Courtney, you said the middle school 6 proposal. Would it be a fair restatement of your proposal that you would like to adopt the springboard as amended to date? Is
Yes.
that the same thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
And I am seconding that.
Okay.
Yes.
So I have a second on that motion. Sorry for the restating, but when you're doing it virtually,
No, but
it's hard.
I understood what she said. And
I understood what
Thank
she
you.
said too, but I want to make sure everybody else understood what she said.
We're just keeping you on your toes, Jake.
I know. So there is been a motion and a second to adopt the springboard proposal as amended to date. Now I want to make sure everybody knows what the effects of that motion are, because I wouldn't be doing my job as a facilitator if I didn't explain it. And I did touch upon that before break. So in effect, what that would do is that it would vote down number 2 and 3 and move forward with the springboard and the work we've done to date. And that would also incorporate the 80-20 discovery split as well. So that is the whole enchilada. Okay.
Can you see that one more time, Jake? Apologies.
So the motion on the floor to adopt the springboard as amended to date would in effect, the committee would be taking action to vote down number 2, because obviously that is the not in the current springboard proposal. The same with number 3 on my summary. Maybe I'll share my screen. Sorry about that.
Yeah, Jake, maybe you can share your screen, and this is just an idea, but I'm going to use this phrase for the trillionth time in the last 11 months. We are in uncharted waters of facilitating a boundary review committee on Zoom. So not only could you put that up, but maybe could you type out and like bold and articulate what that proposal is so people can see that and see what it is in writing there on your screen share?
Working on it, Dr. Elmy.
Perfect, thank you. And as CFO Cooper is doing that, I just want to reiterate, when we do come to a opportunity to vote, remember for the trillionth time, if you are not one of the 40 committee members, don't vote. And when people do vote, we will reconcile that later with all to make sure that we do have the 40 people who are voting members of this committee. I'm sure that we will, but we will reconcile that as well, which Stephen is able to do.
Dr. Olney, I didn't realize that the discovery portion was going to be included in this motion. So I get to make one last comment about that then, correct?
Sure, we are still in the discussion phase of that, correct?
Okay, so just one last thing for everyone to hear. You know, our discovery community understands that splitting 20% of these kids to Beaver Lake Middle School will allow these students to ultimately end up in high school with potentially more friends. But over 430 people have signed a petition asking that now is not the time, with the current situation going on, to keep these kids together. Specifically, if we can't keep them together forever, to look at a grandfather clause, so at least those that are currently at Pine Lake Middle School get to stay at Pine Lake Middle School. I know we've heard ad nauseum that you guys don't like to do that, but special times call for special circumstances. So I just want everyone to know how opposed people are to that in our discovery community, knowing full well we have received many concessions from this boundary committee already. That doesn't mean we don't want to ask for more. You know, you might not agree that we deserve any more because we've gotten some, but it's just something I feel like I need to speak for all my constituents who feel very passionately about this, especially during these times.
Thank you, Lisa. And in that Jake is still working on that, I believe. If there is any other discussion on that, raise a virtual hand or let me know in the chat. And I want to make sure that we capture all the comments that we have on that before we would ever move to a vote. So if there's anyone else that would like to take part in that discussion, now is a good time to do that.
So I think I have it captured and the share screen's up. Is that? Sorry, Dr. Omi. Need to be bigger. I see nodding heads. Any for the principals in the room, that looks like correct language. Am I recitating that appropriately? I believe so.
And we do have Andrew. We have a 2 in the queue. Andrew, you are up.
Hi, yeah, good evening. I'm Andrew Gus. I'm the Maple Hills rep. I'm just want to say I'm in support of this motion to approve as is the Springboard proposal as amended. You know, for the sake of the Maple Hills community, I think Joellen did a great job of already expressing some of our greater viewpoints and advocating for not adopting the Newcastle proposal. I think just, you know, one thing many people know, if I were to add two additional points to that, one is, you know, while it's not part of the charter that we consider equity issues and when we make these decisions, it's been clearly expressed by many of this committee that that's something we value. And one thing people may not know is that the Maple Hills school, and then feeding into Maywood and then feeding into Liberty, serves a community of passage point in the Issaquah School District. And this community is a place where parents that have faced homelessness and incarceration are given an opportunity to reunite with their children and represent one of the most impacted groups in our school district. And the idea of creating another impact on them by changing their flow from Maple Hills to Maywood would be extremely disruptive and would really interrupt a set of systems that are already in place to support them between Maple Hills and Maywood. So I just want to say for that reason, I definitely support moving forward with the Springboard proposal as amended. And then just we all know how bad Issaquah Hobart is. You know, during peak hours, that road between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. has over 1,000 cars on it, on that small stretch of road. And this is true of peak hours returning home between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. Based on a study that was just done like 3 years ago. And, you know, just factoring that into the bus commute, not including all the individual drop-offs, would easily take the majority of our students' drop-offs over an hour easily, which isn't to say that 900 isn't busy it is, but being somebody personally that makes that commute in that way, coming back from the Seattle area in that evening, I will always pick 900 to May Valley coming home instead of Issaquah Hobart. It's just simply faster, and there's less traffic that direction. I understand the difficulty that the Newcastle community and all communities involved are going through with shifts here. And I just, appreciate the community voice and the opportunity to represent Maple Hills in this. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. One more in the queue. Trisha Marshall. Trisha, you're up.
Thanks, Dr. Alme. I know this is not part of our charter and it's not part of what we're considering, but I do feel it prudent to piggyback on Lisa's comment. Just whomever needs to hear it in the consideration of how this will all be implemented coming out of a year where everyone has been in remote schooling and has been facing difficulties already, to take consideration into whether or not fifth graders to be and eighth graders, or sixth graders to be, eighth graders to be, whomever the right people are, could be grandfathered so that we don't have kids changing schools for 1 year just to go back to a different place again, and minimize that kind of change we're putting on kids. I know it's not something we really want to get into, but I just want to go on the record that coming out of a year like this, it might be worth special consideration.
Thank you, Trisha. Keeping my eye on the participant and see if there's any more virtual hands. I do not see any. And Mark Clemens, our Clark rep, you are up.
Good evening, everyone. I know it's been a long evening for a lot of people. I just wanted to speak to the Clark parents who actually were able to band together against the proposals. The reason being is like Clark is a very big geographic area already. So play dates for us and all kinds of bonding with other parents is already kind of a hurdle. And by taking 20% of the Clark community and moving them over to PCMS, it would also be denying them some of the amenities of downtown, like the community center or the garage or the library that a lot of them do rely upon. As a resident who actually lives along Issaquah Hobart and knows that commute very well, or lack of commute and traffic and congestion and stuff, and also as a parent who drove my kid around to Apollo for 3 years, that's not going to go away anytime soon. And as Russ, I believe, had said, Andrew, sorry, had said about this, it's going to, the Maple Hills coming down to IMS is going to add so much time to being on a bus that's people are away from their family, people are away from learning. So anyway, I appreciate everybody in this process and everything, and thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mark. Marcel Waldman, you are up.
I just wanted to also kind of piggyback on Mark as well and just say thank you to the IVE community for all the communication and just, getting the word out and everyone sort of understanding what arose and, appreciating all the time that the proposals that were given. There was a lot of time and effort put into those. But in the end, for our IVE community, keeping the springboard proposal that was set forth from the beginning of all of this really made the most sense for our community. And I'll say, I live in the Tallis community. I will be that 30% if that's the way this vote goes tonight, where my children will be sort of split from their school, but hopefully we'll unite in high school and these kids are resilient and it will all be okay. So for our community, that split works best for where everyone lives and what their needs are. So just wanted to speak to that and say thank you.
Thank you, Marcel. Two more in the queue. Leanne Tupou. Leanne, you are up.
So I just wanted to get this on record too for the Lakemont community. I do think that the last boundary change that happened was kind of done to that community, not with a natural geographic split or anything of that nature. And so if this is voted down, I mean, I've heard all of the different perspectives and reasoning there, but I just want to go on record and state that if there is any opportunity for future conversations about the boundary or an additional school or any of those pieces, just that Lakemont piece can be a forefront in the conversation, looking at the boundaries for Cougar Ridge and Sunset.
Thank you, Leanne. And one more in the queue, Aaron McKee.
I just wanted to add on a couple comments that we discussed in our breakout group. I think it was the Sunset rep did want to just express that there might have been some misinformation about the Lakemont proposal, and really their number one goal was just community cohesion. And that's really what's behind the Newcastle proposal as well. I think, Andrew, the Maple Hills rep, was in my breakout group, and he expressed that, it's not a bad proposal, except that it would make the Maple Hills students displaced, right? So there's just been a ton of work by community members just trying to think through all the complexities. And ultimately, as the current Maywood principal, it is a very large school. And when we have real life students in it, it is a lot. It is really important that we keep that in mind, and that we take out quite a bit of students out of the Maywood enrollment. I think that's just key. Just want to say that we're growing so fast. We're hit 1,200 really fast, and then went into 1,250 really soon. We were starting to look at a 4-lunch schedule, and that's wild. Because of the size of the cafeteria at Maywood, we were looking at starting
brunch, Principal McKee.
Yeah, we were looking at starting lunch at, before 10 a.m. So anyway, I just want to express that although these ideas came from the community that I was CC'd on, really super thoughtful by really smart people, ultimately it's that numerical balance, and Maywood needs to be relieved just to make sure all students benefit in their educational experience.
Thank you, Principal McKee. I just want to give just maybe 10 more seconds to see if there's another hand that pops up in the participant section, so that we give the appropriate amount of time for any further discussion before we were to take a vote on the motion that is on the table right now. And I do not see any other hands up. CFO Cooper, would you like to restate one more time what the motion that we'll be voting on? And then Stephen Collins can put our voting mechanism up.
So everybody, I assume, can see the share screen. So you watched me awkwardly type all that and figured out what I couldn't spell in my head. But so the highlighted portion at the bottom is the motion, and then the effect, because I always think it's important whenever you do a motion that people understand the effect of their action. That's just a habit that I've learned over the years. So the motion would be, this has been moved and seconded. I move the committee adopt the springboard proposal as amended. I took out to date because it's kind of redundant. And then the effect would be that number 1 is adopted because it remains in the springboard, right? Because there's no changes in the reality. And number 2 and 3 would no longer be acceptable to the committee. I didn't know how to word that. I'm not saying that it's not viable or you're voting it down, but that would be the effect of the action. So are there any further discussions before I call for the question? Okay. I can't see because I have a share screen on, Dr. Elmy.
Not seeing any virtual hands raised.
So I'm going to stop sharing screen, and Stephen, would you bring up the poll, please? So perfect. Somebody, nice. I move the committee adopt the springboard proposal as amended. Effect would be number 1 adopted. Number 2 and 3 are no longer acceptable to the committee. So we'll continue, and the poll is open.
And remember, with 40 members present, 30 votes are needed to meet the 75% threshold.
We have 38, well, 39. We need one more unless there's an abstention.
Jake, we did have one of our group members, Amy, had to leave for a work function. So she was here at the
Okay.
beginning, but not here
So
anymore.
that appears to be the total universe. So Dr. Almy, your math is out of 39 representatives. I don't know, can the committee see?
CFO Cooper, I want to say as a former math teacher, that in order to meet our 75% threshold of a 40-person quorum, we need 30 votes. For a motion to pass, we have 38. So that means that that motion would pass.
Congratulations, everybody. You just took a massive action that will allow the district to move forward its recommendation to the superintendent. So I greatly appreciate. Does the team have the votes tallied and captured for the record before I hit stop share results? Yes. Okay. So, wow. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. In all seriousness, boundaries are an extraordinarily emotional and intellectual process. And to second what I heard, we have a very amazing and bright community that puts a lot of work into these things, and that's why these boundaries are always hard, because people's proposals make sense. And so that's why there was a lot of deliberation, both behind the scenes and I know for each of you, for your respective stakeholder groups. So let's talk about next steps, since you completed a huge amount of work with that adoption of the Springboard as amended. As I said, we have a technical correction that we'd like to bring back. Mr. Baines will not let me forget that, for the Rainbow Ranch and the Sunny Hills Elementary 16. So we'll have that for you next meeting. The other thing that Dr. Almy and I talked about is often the last boundary meeting as a group is kind of a fun one, believe it or not. You get to some closure about some technical details, but then that's when I bring the big guns in. I bring Jody Bongard and Susan Mandel in, and the middle school principals, and they talk about transitions, which your job's not done because you took a vote. Your job actually is just beginning in some ways, because now you become the liaison between those folks that are moving. And so we will talk about, when do I have a new PTSA? How do I cross-pollinate my old president with my new president? Can my kid have a tour of the new school? They've just been moved. They're really nervous. They want to see it. And so those are some of the things that I've already gave a heads up to Jody and Susan. And that's actually kind of the real cool part, because what we do with these boundary processes, we kind of blow the community apart for a little bit, and then we quickly try to wrap our arms back around it and put you all back together. So I know that sounds kind of corny, but that is really the goal, is to bring everybody back together, realize that all our schools are good, and not everybody's going to be happy with what just happened. I guarantee that there's going to be some more emails. But next meeting, Dr. Almy, technical corrections, and then the whole reunification process, for lack of better description, is what we really focus on, and how we get you involved in that process. Josh, did I miss anything?
Yeah, I think you missed one thing, and I'm going to cover that base for you. A huge thanks to CFO Cooper and his team, Executive Director Martin Turney, Colleen, Bridget, and I'm sure I'm probably Nirmala,
Teresa and Lisa White as well.
White,
admin assistants.
As we go through this process, it's very central to a couple of departments. And although Jake and I facilitated this together, and as we do most committees with the district, the work that he and his team put in, that technical team, I have to take my hat off to them. That was months and months and months of work. Really started about a year and a half ago, and it evolves because things change. And hats off to Jake and your team for giving us that starting point and leading into some really rich, important discussions that we don't get to where we are without you and your team and all the work that they put in. And it was really difficult too, because as you can all imagine, during the pandemic that we're in right now, we get pulled in lots of different directions, but that work didn't stop. So Jake, I appreciate you and your team getting that work done. There were times that I wish I could jump in and help answer some of these questions to the level that that you guys are able to do, but I'm glad that you were here. We couldn't do it without you. One more thing, it's always been customary at the culmination of a boundary review in the Issaquah School District for a last meeting to have a sheet cake. Well, guess what? We're going to have to figure out a way to do a virtual sheet cake. I don't know how we're going to be able to do that, but
And you are saying sheet cake, correct?
SHEET, sheet cake, the kind you get at Albertsons. We'll have to figure out a way to get that done. We've got 2 weeks to figure that out.
Okay, so we owe you, the district, we will have clean district-wide maps because we'll have the team go through with a fine-tooth comb to make sure there's everything is aligned up. And then I see your hand, Suzanne. I will get to you. The president, school board president Weaver will also would like to say something. And the technical corrections. I think that will be the culmination, and then of course the next steps, and then the reunification process, for lack of a better description. Suzanne, feel free. You have the floor.
I just wanted to say on behalf of the school board, a heartfelt thank you to everyone who served on this committee. You had a tremendous amount of work to do. I have never seen so much email to a boundary committee in the 14 and a half years I've been on the board. There were a lot of moving parts. You were very thoughtful. You communicated with your constituencies. You handled this incredibly well. And when it's all said and done, someone will be mad at you. And that's kind of how it works on the school board too. We volunteer to do this, we make decisions, and somebody's mad. But I think you guys have done an awesome job. I know it was difficult, and you have our thanks. This is really an important way to get the community involved and make sure we have the right boundaries. So thank you very much.
Thank you, board member Weaver. Jake, I think we have our work cut out for us over the next 2 weeks. We will we'll get back to work on that. Everybody else, I said that we would have a hard stop at 8:30. It's 8:20, 10 minutes early. What a deal. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Great work tonight.